The month of December and 2021 as a whole has come to an end, so it's once again time to recount what I've been up to. Since I dabbled in a lot during December, and since I'll be talking about 2021 as a whole near the end, I may go through topics a bit quicker than normal, so both you and I aren't here all day. Without the way, sit back and relax as I recount what I've been up to in December 2021. This time let's start with what I watched, beginning with two movies, one of which I loved and one I did not. The first being the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which I finally got around to watching after my friends borderline kidnapped me into watching it. And if I had to sum up my thoughts on it in one word, it'd be meh. Like, it wasn't a bad movie by any means, but I was just not into it, especially after people hyped up to me about being the best video game movie ever made. All I saw was an unfunny generic fish out of water / buddy cop movie with Sonic characters and a million unsubtle Sonic references. I know everyone loves this movie and it's the most successful video game movie ever, but I personally cannot see why. Moving on to something I did like, I saw a few people all talking about this movie called Don't Look Up on Netflix and how it was relevant to modern times, so I checked it out. It's a movie about scientists discovering a meteor heading to Earth that will wipe out all life on the planet and their unsuccessful attempts to warn those in power about the imminent extinction of our species. It's a pretty on-the-nose commentary about our current culture of useless leaders that look out only for their own self-interest, vain social media influencers, and how we try to ignore serious issues that will impact not only us in the future, but likely screw over future generations. With the insanity of the world around us these last few years especially, I often feel like I'm the only one not taking crazy pills, and it's nice to find a movie that really encapsulates that feeling. There's also plenty of genuine laugh out loud funny moments in it too, which is nice. You should definitely set aside the time to watch it. In November's video, I talked about how I was watching American Horror Story double feature and how it was split into 2 seasons, and I talked about how I only got to see the first part. Well, I finished both parts in December and it was a mixed bag. The first half dealt with vampires and the second half dealt with aliens. I'm a sucker for a good story of both subjects, and both parts had so much potential, but in my opinion they both ultimately fell flat. And I kinda mean that in a more literal sense with both endings. Part 1's ending was just unsatisfying, and Part 2's ending was the epitome of abrupt. I will say though, the setup they were doing in Part 2 had my complete attention. It was going through post-World War II through Vietnam War America and how aliens had infiltrated our government and given us all the technology we have. It was classical alien movie stuff, but it was just presented in a way from acting, the sound effects, the cinematography that made me super immersed and want to pay attention. There's a plotline about the aliens wanting to create the perfect human-alien hybrid, and as I said earlier, it just ends super abruptly after the first one is born. It was overall a unique season with so much potential that sadly just didn't live up to it. Now let's move on to the games I played last month, and we have quite a few to go through today since I was jumping around between a lot of titles last month. Let's start briefly with Monster Rancher 1 and 2 DX. I have a review of it up on the channel, so if you want my full thoughts on it, go there. But to sum it up quickly, it's aged amazingly, and the new quality of life improvements make it even better. Monster Rancher is always one of the most innovative series out there, and I love for it to finally get a real revival with new entries and finally get its recognition among the other great monster collectors out there. Next up, let's talk about Yakuza Like a Dragon, a game that took me by complete surprise that I immediately fell in love with. It's not my first Yakuza game, but it's definitely my favorite now, and Ichi is one of my favorite protagonists of any game ever. Whoever thought to make a Yakuza game that was a Dragon Quest game in disguise needs a raise, because the combination works so well, and they really captured that wholesome, warm feeling that the Dragon Quest games do so well that makes you just fall in love with these characters. I can't sing this game's praises enough, and I cannot wait to continue it. Whenever the next chapter of Ichi's adventure is announced, you can bet I'll be there day one. Now let's talk very briefly about Halo Infinite's campaign. Gonna be very honest, I had no interest in this. I played the Halo games for multiplayer mainly, and the only reason I even gave this game a chance was because it was free with Game Pass. I'll give it to 3 for 3, open world Halo sounds interesting on paper, and I did go in with an unbiased perspective. And after a few hours, I dropped it. I literally almost fell asleep playing this. The story is uninteresting, the combat is fine, and the ways you can use the grappling hook is cool, but the actual exploration of the open world and the gameplay flow didn't do anything for me. Not a bad game, just definitely not for me. Now let's talk about my favorite Pokemon fan game, Pokemon Insurgence. This wasn't my first time playing the game, or even my second, but this is the farthest I've ever gotten in the game and maybe the most I've ever enjoyed it now that all the updates for it are out. To summarize what Insurgence is, it's set in two regions with various cults trying to summon and use legendary Pokemon for nefarious means, and you of course have to stop them. What makes Insurgence stand out from its contemporaries is quality of life improvements over other games and the unique ideas it brings that make it quite a fun game to play. You can have a secret base that lets you access helpful functions like easy and quick level grinding or instant access to any Pokemon eggs you may have. There are regional variants called Delta Pokemon that were a thing before regional variants were introduced in Sun and Moon. The level cap is even raised to 120 to compensate for the game's length. It's just a bunch of little things in tandem with a genuinely good Pokemon adventure that just make it a blast to play through. If you've never played it and have even the slightest interest, I highly recommend it. Now I have a few more games to talk about, but they were all on the PlayStation 5, which I finally got my hands on last month and treated myself with as a Christmas present. So just think of this as the PS5 section. For my overall thoughts on the system itself, I like it. Hardware and UI wise, it's not bad, nothing too crazy, but the two main things I will get the PS5 pros for over the PS4 is how quiet it is along with how powerful it is. I actively dislike playing games on my PS4 because of how loud it was. I initially put a noise gate on my microphone during streams because my PS4 could break through the mic despite being several feet away. And the PS4 and Xbox One were the weakest I'd ever seen new consoles be out the gate, so seeing my PS5 rival my 2060 graphics card in power was not only a nice surprise, but made the price point worth it. Load times are also impressive since PS5 games run off the internal SSD, though the lack of space on it has been annoying so far. I even bought the PS5 Pulse 3D headset just to play my games on, and honestly that impressed me too. I was skeptical about 3D audio, but it really does make games more immersive, even after you've long gotten used to the effect. And they're surprisingly good headphones in general. So in short, the PS5 impressed me and I don't regret buying one. Now as for the games themselves, let's start with the one I played the most, SpiderMan Remastered. I never got to play Spider-Man on PS4, I was initially going to wait until it was on sale to pick it up, and then when they announced it was getting a PS5 upgrade, I decided to wait until I got a PS5 to pick it up. And so here we are. And much to my own surprise, I loved it. The game's Peter is very likable, the graphics are insane, swinging around New York never gets old, I loved unlocking and switching between the various suits in the game, and the combat was surprisingly deep and never got boring. Definitely my favorite superhero game of all time. And when I beat it, I immediately moved on to its sequel slash spin-off, Miles Morales. And this one is more of a mixed bag for me so far, which is why I haven't finished it yet, despite it being shorter. In general, I prefer Miles over Peter as a character and as Spider-Man, and the Miles in this game isn't bad. My issue with this game so far is the forced puzzles that overstay their welcome. This may sound super minor to a lot of you, but it's extremely rare I like puzzles in non-puzzle games. I just want to be Spider-Man and beat up bad guys while webbing around the city. I still really like the game though, and I like the changes to Miles' style of combat, like his Venom skills. I'm very excited to see what the proper Spider-Man 2 brings to the table, and I'll definitely be there day one. I bought a couple other PS5 games in the FF7 Remake Integrate and upgraded my PS4 version of Ghost of Tsushima, but I didn't really dig into them yet. But what I did sink some time into is Far Cry 6. I, like many others, first got into Far Cry with 3 and absolutely loved it. I never got to play 4, which I'll one day rectify, and 5 was the epitome of okay. But Far Cry 6 has really impressed me so far with its gameplay and its characters. As always, we have a great villain, and the slew of weapons and mods you can attach on them has been very fun to mess with. It's also the first shooter I played with the PS5 controller's adaptive triggers, and I personally love it. It makes it so you can really feel the weight of certain weapons, and the novelty hasn't worn off for me. All in all, I'm really enjoying the PS5 so far and hoping it has some heavy hitters coming this year for me to sink my teeth into. So I want to end this one just by talking about some of my thoughts on 2021 in general, how the year went for me, and so on. And while 2021 had some bad lows, it was overall a good year for me. Maybe more than that, it was a successful year. I have a job that I don't hate doing for the first time in my life. I uploaded almost 150 videos to YouTube, and for these last few months I've been very generally happy, with depression taking a backseat to affecting me in my everyday life for the first time in almost 15 years. It's a good feeling, and for a long time I didn't think I'd be able to win against depression, even temporarily. I will admit I'm disappointed we didn't hit our year goal for 5,000 subs here on YouTube, but I'm not upset because I truly did everything in my power. Putting YouTube before relationships, as I previously previously stated, I uploaded almost 150 videos last year, which is the highest amount I've ever done on the channel in a year, and I just in general gave 110% to the channel in 2021. But for whatever reason, new people just don't want to subscribe. It sucks, but I'm grateful to all of you that are subscribed in ways words can't describe. I have the most amazing ride or die supporters I could ask for, and I'm grateful for every one of you. It's unknown what 2022 will throw at me, but for the first time ever, I'm anxious with excitement and positivity that I can and will rise above and conquer it.